She laughed at the myths of human warriors, until she witnessed one in battle HFY. To Commander Velira of the Corthian Dominion, those stories were laughable. Velira stood tall in the command chamber of the war cruiser Starfang. Her armored form reflected the soft blue light of the holographic star map. Around her stood officers of different allied species, all focused on the incoming briefing. Velira had earned her position through decades of battle. She had faced massive beasts, intelligent machines, and ruthless empires. Compared to those threats, humans sounded like a joke. A junior officer activated the display. A rotating image appeared: short, soft-skinned creatures with no claws, no fangs, and no natural armor. Humans, the officer said. Origin world classified as a death world. High gravity, extreme climate variation. Long history of internal conflict. Commander, records show humans have survived conditions that wiped out stronger species. They're myths. Claws hardened by war, muscles grown under constant gravity. These creatures evolved to survive, not dominate. A hostile force had been raiding trade routes and attacking outposts. The coalition had finally decided to respond. Our task is simple, Velira said. We enter the zone, eliminate resistance, and secure the corridor. Single operative, embedded for joint force experience. They want to watch real warriors fight, so they can tell better stories back home. Hours later, the Starfang exited hyperspace near a shattered asteroid belt. Wreckage floated silently, remnants of destroyed ships. Sensors began to ping warnings. Velira took her seat on the command throne. Status. Enemy fire streaked through space, lighting the darkness with sudden flashes. The ambush had begun. Battle stations, Velira commanded calmly. Her warriors moved with discipline and confidence. This was their domain. War was familiar, comfortable. She barely noticed when a quiet figure entered the command chamber. The human arrived without ceremony. He was smaller than everyone else in the room. His armor was different, compact, functional, without decorative spikes or intimidation markings. His helmet was sealed, visor dark. He stood still, observing. Velira glanced at him briefly. "So this is the human," she said. "You're early. This will be over quickly. Return fire." He said nothing. Enemy forces cut through external defenses faster than anticipated. Boarding alarms echoed through the ship. Velira's warriors rushed to contain the threat. She watched tactical displays as her units engaged. At first they held. Then red markers multiplied. "They are adapting," an officer said. "They are learning our formations." The human finally spoke. "Permission to reposition closer to the combat zones. They exploit reaction delays." This enemy was not behaving as expected. They were reckless, aggressive, and relentless. Losses mounted, retreat routes narrowed. The human remained still like a shadow. Velira turned to him again. "If you see so much human, then speak." That makes them unpredictable. The myths echoed in her memory, stories she had mocked, stories she had dismissed. She pushed the thought aside. This was not the time. "Prepare counterboarding teams," she ordered. "We end this now." And for the first time, Commander Velira wondered if the myths she laughed at were not myths at all, but unfinished truths. The battle inside the Starfang grew worse with every passing minute. Smoke-filled corridors. Emergency lights flickered red and blue, casting long shadows over armored warriors rushing to defend key sections of the ship. Commander Velira moved through the command deck with controlled urgency, but inside her thoughts were no longer calm. This was not how the battle was supposed to go. Enemy boarding forces had spread faster than predicted. They moved with reckless speed, ignoring losses, charging straight into defended zones. Velira's warriors fought with discipline and skill, but discipline alone was not stopping the advance. Reports streamed in from every level of the ship. Deck 4 lost. The human observer followed a few steps behind her, silent as always. His armor bore fresh marks from debris impacts, yet his movements remained steady. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. He simply watched. Valera stopped at a tactical console where a large map of the ship glowed in the air. "They are pushing directly toward the core," she said. "They want to cripple us, not capture. Because they believe survival comes from breaking stronger enemies, not defeating them cleanly." The corridor filled with noise and heat. The enemy attackers fell, but not before damaging more systems. Valera watched their lifeless forms being dragged away. "They throw themselves at us," she said. "No fear, no retreat. That is desperation." She turned to her guards. "Move out." Corthian warriors fought desperately against a larger enemy force pouring in from multiple entry points. Valera raised her weapon and joined the fight without hesitation. She struck with precision, cutting down attackers and directing her troops with sharp commands. Still, the enemy kept coming. "We can't hold this," a captain shouted. Valera assessed the situation rapidly. Retreat would expose civilians and wounded deeper in the ship. Holding position meant heavy losses. She hated being forced into such a choice. The human moved closer to her side. "Commander, this is not your battlefield. If you have something to say, say it." Everything in her training told her this was foolish. Sending a single human into that chaos would achieve nothing. And yet, nothing else was working. "What do you propose?" she asked stiffly. The human pointed to the map. "Their advance depends on momentum. Break it. Force them to react. You expect to stop an assault force alone." "Understood." Valera watched in disbelief as the human weaved through the chaos, forcing attackers to turn, hesitate, and regroup. Every second they spent reacting to him was a second they were not advancing. "Redirect fire," Valera ordered suddenly. "Follow the human's movement." Then noticeable, enemy momentum slowed. The human took a hit, stumbling briefly. Valera's breath caught, but he pushed forward anyway, using the pain as fuel rather than a stopping point. "He's still moving," an officer whispered. Valera said nothing. She simply watched. The hangar was still a battlefield, still dangerous, but something had shifted. The enemy was no longer confident. They hesitated. They reacted instead of attacking freely. For the first time since the ambush began, Valera felt a spark of control return. The human fell back toward her lines, wounded but standing. Valera stared at him as medics rushed forward. "You should be dead," she said quietly. The human looked at her through his visor. "Not yet." As the enemy began to retreat from the hangar, she realized something unsettling. The human had not won the battle. He had changed it. And that, she suspected, was far more dangerous than strength alone. The battle did not end when the enemy pulled back from the hangar. It only changed shape. Emergency crews rushed to seal damaged sections while warriors dragged the wounded to safety. Fires were contained, but power levels across the Starfang continued to drop. The ship was bleeding, slowly and steadily. Commander Valera stood near the hangar entrance, watching medics work on the human. His armor was cracked in several places. Dark stains marked where his suit had sealed wounds automatically. Even now, he tried to rise. "Stay still," one medic ordered. "I can move," the human replied, his voice strained but firm. Valera stepped closer. "You've done enough." New red markers appeared, larger and more organized than before. "They're not retreating," she said. "They're preparing to finish us." She had survived countless wars, but this moment felt different, not because of fear, but because she could not see a path forward. The human pushed himself to his feet despite the medic's protests. "Commander," he said, "they believe you are broken. You expect me to believe a wounded observer has the answer my entire command does not." It showed enemy movement patterns from the last engagement. "They rely on pressure," he said. "They overwhelm, then exploit panic. But when pressure fails, they hesitate, they regroup, they doubt. Humans specialize in fighting when we should not survive. We learn to make the enemy question every step." Valera's eyes narrowed, such as, "When confusion spreads, fear follows. You are not even part of my chain of command." "That is acceptable." Victory is sometimes a side effect. Enemy guns fired, missing by narrow margins. The human piloted alone. Inside the craft, alarms blared, systems flickered. The human ignored them. He focused on timing. He accelerated straight toward the enemy command vessel. "They're firing," an officer reported. "He won't make it." Enemy fire overshot. Then he moved again, faster, closer. Enemy ships scrambled. Formation broke slightly. "Direct hit incoming," the strategist said. The human S-craft slammed into the side of the command vessel, not as a weapon but as an entry. Boarding alarms echoed across enemy channels. Valeera watched in stunned silence as internal scans showed the human moving inside the enemy ship. Alone. "He's inside," an officer whispered. The enemy command vessel descended into chaos. Internal signals spiked, then vanished. Orders contradicted each other. Ships hesitated, unsure. The human moved through the vessel like a force of nature, not fast, not loud, but unstoppable. He adapted to resistance, changed routes, used enemy systems against themselves. Minutes felt like hours. Then something changed. Enemy ships began to pull back, not retreating, panicking. "They're breaking formation," an officer shouted. Valeera stood slowly. The human's signal reappeared briefly, then went dark. Her chest tightened. "Did we lose him?" the strategist asked softly. Valeera said nothing. Then the enemy command vessel detonated, not violently but internally, systems collapsing all at once. It drifted powerless. Enemy ships scattered. The battlefield fell quiet. Valeera stared at the empty space where the human signal had been. She did not cheer. She did not celebrate. She felt only respect. Moments later, a weak signal appeared near the debris field. "He's alive," an officer said, disbelief clear in his voice. A recovery team was dispatched immediately. When they brought the human back aboard, he was barely conscious. His armor was destroyed. His body was exhausted beyond anything Valeera had ever seen. Yet he was breathing. Valeera stood beside the medical bay, watching him. The myths returned to her mind, but now they felt too small. This was not legend. This was reality, and the galaxy was not ready for it. The battle was over, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the fighting itself. Inside the medical bay of the Starfang, machines hummed softly. Lights glowed steady and calm, a sharp contrast to the chaos that had filled the ship only hours before. Warriors who had survived the ambush stood quietly along the walls, their armor scarred, their pride shaken. At the center of the room lay the human. His armor had been cut away. Bandages and healing fields covered his body. Every breath he took was shallow but steady. Medics worked carefully, whispering to each other as if loud voices might break something fragile. Commander Valeera stood at the foot of the medical platform, unmoving. She had commanded fleets. She had watched worlds burn and alliances fall, yet she had never stood this still for a single warrior. "He should not be alive," one medic said quietly. "By our standards, his body passed its limits long ago." He looked smaller without armor, weaker, ordinary, and yet he had done what entire fleets could not. The doors opened behind her. Officers entered with updated reports. "Enemy forces have withdrawn completely," the strategist said. "Their command structure collapsed after the loss of the command vessel. They left the sector." "And our losses?" She remembered mocking the stories of humans who fought beyond reason, who endured what others could not. She did not laugh now. Hours passed. The Starfang limped toward safer territory. Repairs continued. Warriors rested where they could. Yet many found themselves returning to the medical bay, standing quietly, watching the human sleep. They did not speak. They did not need to. When the human finally woke, it was not dramatic. No sudden movement, no heroic words. His eyes opened slowly. Pain greeted him first, then light, then unfamiliar shapes. He tried to move and failed. "Don't," a medic said gently. "You are alive, that is enough." "Yes. You endangered yourself and my ship." The sound carried across the room. Several warriors straightened without realizing it. "I mocked your people," Valeera said. "I called your legends myths." "To survive." Analysts slowed footage, replayed moments, searched for hidden advantages. They found none. No superior weapons, no secret technology, only a human refusing to stop. Other species reacted with disbelief, some with fear, some with awe. On distant worlds, military doctrines were quietly rewritten. Humans were no longer listed as a minor power. They were classified as something else entirely. Weeks later, the Starfang arrived at a coalition station for repairs. Delegates from multiple species arrived to debrief Commander Velira. They expected explanations. They received truth. Velira stood before the council chamber, her voice steady. "We survived because one human understood something we did not," she said. "That strength is not measured by how hard you strike, but by how long you stand when you should have fallen." "Your people will want you back," she said. "Yes," he replied. "You could stay," she added. "My fleet would honor you." "That would be wise." And somewhere among the stars, humanity continued forward, scarred, stubborn, and unstoppable.